Good morning. Sometimes a talk comes through me easily, and sometimes less so. Today's was difficult in ways which are unusual for me. And when I told Doug Smith about my struggles, he said, "You could always do the Aussie invocation from Monty Python's Bruce sketch, which is, for those of you wondering, 'Oh Lord, we beseech thee, amen.'" Would have been a quick Sunday, right? Honestly, I considered it briefly. We begin a new series of 5 talks today, this time on the idea of magic. And perhaps I haven't told you this yet, but this collection of sermon series is being called M is for Miracles, and Mirage was the first topic, so now we're moving into the second, which is magic. I thought earlier in the week that I knew where I was going with this talk, but then life happened and my direction changed. Have you ever known someone who's magic? Just kind of as their very beingness? I know one extraordinary woman. Some of you know her, and all of you have heard me talk about her, and she is my sister mom, Debbie Smith. She has lived in my heart for decades now, and she and her hubby, Doug, the aforementioned Monty Python suggestion, they are as much members of my family as Mike and my kids are. And Debbie is magical, and I mean that truly, because she meets hostility and ineptitude and error and insult and every other possible triggering situation or personality with patience and love and gentleness. And I've never, ever, not in all of the years that I've known her, I have never seen her in a negative place. Not once. She loves all things sparkly, and she sings like the most beautiful birds. She, to my eye and to those who know her well, walks on air. And Debbie, as of my writing this, is awaiting her transition. I seldom mourn someone's passing, but this one is rough for me. So if I get weepy, please be patient with me. The truth is, I can't think of a better time to talk about the idea of magic than this one. When a woman who taught me that magic is a way of being, that magic is in every single moment that love is allowed to shine, that magic is the thing which rests in the heart of all living things, and that it takes only a moment of choice to recognize it. This day, to speak of magic as she prepares to make her way into eternity is perfect. She will be a recurring name throughout these talks, I have no doubt. I have so many magical moments with her that I'm sure that they'll come springing forward every time I need a good example and I'm grasping at words, and I know that she'll help me find them. I'm going to change directions. That, by the way, the skinny lady with the short hair, that was me, like 25 years ago. Things change. And Debbie is the one on the right. And that is Diana in the middle. So I'm going to change directions intentionally and kind of suck the tears back in, because I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I am an ugly crier, like a genuinely ugly crier, and I really wish I was kidding, but I have seen it, and it is not cute. So I am absolutely going to veer into a different path abruptly. So when we think of magic, all kinds of things pop into our minds, right? Top hats and rabbits, or specific tricks, or famous illusionists, or maybe even bumbling Muppets waving a wand and saying, "A la peanut butter sandwiches." Everybody remember Mumford? Wasn't he great? But see, the general idea is that magic is an illusion. That is what the modern world believes. In the times which inspired the words we know as the Bible, magic was seen as something to fear. In fact, there are over 20 scriptures warning against magic or sorcery in the Old Testament and over 10 in the New. 12 if you're not being especially particular. Today, we know that some of what was believed to be sorcery back then were explainable events which were given superstitious significance. Can you imagine what people of that time would think if they stood here in this day and age? Yeah, they would be absolutely gobsmacked by our apparent sorcery. And when I realized that, the question sprang to mind of, what is magic by today's standards? Given everything that we've seen, everything which has been recorded in our history, everything which we become desensitized to, or which has become normal to us, what would boggle our minds or make our jaws drop? When today's famous illusionists have levitated over buildings and held their breath for 17 minutes in front of millions and walked across a public pool with swimmers swimming right underneath them, we just look for the camera angle or the trap door or the CGI edit. We shrug and say, that's a neat trick. We live in a world where special effects and technology make the impossible look routine. If Jesus walked on water today, half of the world would pull out their phones to record a TikTok debunking the video, or they'd look for the drone. Yes, this happens everywhere these days. You see the people living through their phones, but especially here in Los Angeles, where every moment could hold a professional film crew making movie magic, right? Society has turned wonder into some kind of puzzle that needs to be solved with obsessive diligence. That, or we call it woo-woo, and we write it off as some pseudo-spiritual nonsense. We encounter something we cannot immediately explain, and instead of remaining open before it, we rush to give it a name. The ancients might say sorcery and admonish us to beware, and we might say CGI. Different conclusion, but the same closing of the door. And so the real question of today has shifted from what is magic to when did we stop allowing ourselves to be astonished? Imagine for a moment that someone from 2,000 years ago were here in this building with us right now, with no context for anything. So we walk over to a wall and we press a dot or flick a little thingy sticking out, and suddenly the room is full of light. If I look out too aggressively, I am blinded by it. Or we pull a piece of glass out of our pocket and we touch the front of it, and suddenly there is not only a picture of someone looking back at us, but the person is speaking with us in real time from some other country. Magic, right? Sorcery, they would say. Understandably, that person would be dumbstruck and would probably consider running for their lives if it weren't for all of the loud metal creatures racing over all of the roads and filling the sky. I imagine that they would be terrified. But from our perspective, there's an interesting pivot, which I think will give you pause. None of us would have called those things magic. When I walk to the wall and I flip the switch to turn on the lights, you know that there are wires in the walls and electricity running through them. That switch allows that to flow. When I pull out my phone, wherever it is, you know that there are cell towers and satellites and computer networks involved. And what about those loud metal creatures outside? Whether they're in the air or on the ground, we know them as vehicles, modes of transportation. We know that they're feats of engineering and aerodynamics. We have explanations. And somewhere along the way, we seem to have decided that once we can explain something, we are no longer permitted to be astonished by it. We have mistaken knowing something about how a thing happens for understanding the astonishing fact that it happens at all. You can know exactly how the light switch works and still recognize what an absolutely bonkers thing electricity is. Okay, think about these. They are truly mind-blowing. A thing buried in dirt takes in water, carbon dioxide, and light from a star 93 million miles away and constructs itself into a tree. And we say photosynthesis, as though giving it a 5-syllable name settled the matter and wraps it up all neat and clean, right? Or how about this one? Two microscopic cells get together after an absolutely, some might say even embarrassingly preposterous sequence of events, and there's eventually a person standing in your kitchen complaining that you bought the wrong cereal. That, of course, we have called biology. Nothing magical happening here. But let's stop for a moment and realize that explanation does not cancel mystery. Science is not the enemy of wonder, and reason is not the enemy of magic. Likewise, we could say discernment is not the enemy of openness, but conclusion is. Because conclusion says, I know what that is. And then we stop looking. We just spent 5 talks examining the ways that we mistake our interpretation of reality for reality itself. And now, perhaps our exploration of the idea of magic can begin with what happens when, instead of imposing the interpretation, when we look again. When did understanding something become permission to stop being astonished by it? We teach disillusionment to kids in schools as useful knowledge and something important to measuring intelligence, but we don't teach them something which, in my opinion, is far more important. We don't teach them that nothing changed about electricity when we learned to harness it. Nothing changed about the stars when we learned what they're made of. Nothing changed about birth when we mapped embryonic development. Nothing changed about love when we began to measure activity in the brain. We decided that we knew, and it stopped mattering. We started to mistake the mechanics for the miracle. Understanding how it all works does not qualify the fact that there is something to work in the first place. And I know I may have lost you there. Maybe I'm just on the verge of losing you because I'm over-explaining. So I'm going to turn to my old friend, the parable. Now, you need to remember, as I've told you before, when I envision my stories, they're either filled with fictional and absolutely adorable, silly creatures, or they're set in some quaint shire where hobbitses might be very comfortable living out their days. This particular parable is of the latter variety. So imagine with me a quaint hobbitsy shire. Okay, the people of this shire are obsessed with wristwatches and clocks. And I will tell you that as I wrote that sentence, my brain played an audio track that derailed my concentration for just a second. It gave me the giggles because what I heard was, OMG, I'm obsessed. Okay, we're back on the rails now. So, village clocks, watches. So a clockmaker comes and he sets up shop. And opening day, he sets up a massive workbench and he took a clock apart. And he laid out all of the pieces under a magnifying glass and he showed the crowd the mainspring and the balance wheel and the tiny gears, and he explained the physics of tension and potential energy and friction, and the people were, at first, transfixed. But then they all seemed to take on an air of, oh, it's just a series of causes and effects, it's just mechanics. And the moment that they understood how the gears turned, they stopped looking at clocks with wonder. That ticking sound became background noise. They became familiar with the mechanics, and that familiarity masqueraded as understanding. They began to treat time itself as something ordinary and routine and entirely uninspired. The magic was gone. It was replaced by a cold, intellectual, hard conclusion. But the clockmaker had a young daughter, and she spent every single day sitting at that bench, watching her father work. She knew the name of every single screw. She knew exactly how much tension that mainspring required. She was, by all accounts, an expert in the science of the watch. Yet every single morning when she wound her own watch, she would hold it to her ear, close her eyes, and listen, gently smiling as the sound registered. The people noticed this, of course, but none really mentioned it. Maybe they thought that her gears were missing a cog or three. But then one day, someone's inside thoughts became outside sounds, and they blurted out, "Why do you look so astonished by that thing? Your father showed us the trick. We know exactly what's inside it. It's just brass and steel and friction and tension. There's no mystery." And the wise little girl met the questioning, if not outwardly judgmental, eyes of the person, and she said, "I know exactly what's in it. I know how the spring pushes the gear and how the gear turns the hand, but my father's science only explains how the watch moves. It doesn't explain why time exists in the first place. It doesn't explain why there is a universe for the earth to turn in or why we are alive to measure it. The gears are just the language my father uses to write a beautiful poem. But knowing how to spell the words doesn't mean the poem isn't magic." And maybe that kind of explains where we went wrong in our thinking. Because we don't only do this with watches and trees and electricity and biology. We do it with people and with circumstances. We learn enough about someone to explain them. And then somewhere along the way, we begin to believe that that means we know them. We use context and labels built on top of a tenuous thread which flows from past into future on a pathway built of judgment to explain a person. She's difficult because of her childhood. He's defensive because he's insecure. She's an introvert. He's a narcissist. And I will say here that I'm getting really, really tired of hearing that word thrown around all over the place. Boy, has it become common. How about this? That's trauma. Or that's ego. That's just the way she is. That's just the way it is. Maybe some of those explanations are even accurate to some extent, but the explanation isn't the person. The events are not the circumstance. We learned how the gears move and we mistook that for knowing what the watch is. And then we stopped looking. Yes, we have already stripped away all of those kinds of beliefs about ourselves. We did that over the course of the entire last series. But what about other people? What about the world? What magic have we taught ourselves not to see? So maybe the first practice of magic in this series is simple. Look again. Before you explain the person sitting beside you or in front of you or in your mind, look again. Before you decide that you know why someone behaved the way that they did, look again. Before you decide why some group moved in the way that they did, look again. Not asking you to do this without intelligence or without discernment, not necessarily without everything else that you think you've learned, just without allowing what you know to become the end of what you're willing to see. I have told you at the beginning that Debbie is magic. I have known this woman for decades. I've known her husband even longer because I can still remember a time when I could look up at him and he was way up there. I've known them a long, long time. So long that they should be completely ordinary to me. But I will tell you, they're not, and she isn't. Somehow, after all of these years, when I look at her, I still see something that I cannot reduce to the mechanics of a personality, a history, or even a lifetime. I still see magic. Maybe that's because I never quite stopped looking, and I won't. Debbie is a large part of the reason I am how I am. And she taught me that by living. That's it. She just did it. You know who you are now, right? You are made of love, by love, moved only to give and receive love. We unpacked all of that and we truly moved into our knowing embodiment of that in the last series. But who else do you know? And what do you think you know about them that makes them so ordinary or unremarkable or perhaps even irritating or exasperating? Look again. Look deeper. Look until all you can see is magic. The title of this sermon is not a coincidence. It's magic, you know? Look all around you. Not just at the people, but at the wonder of it all. The wonder of it all. I only ask you for one thing this week. one tiny pivot in your life. And here's your assignment. Stop knowing everything and just revel in the wonder. Let magic stand before your eyes without the facts constructed to hold it up for dismissal. Life is a gift, and we only get a short while to experience it, a short while to experience each other. Let's start spending our time in wonder at the magic that it exists at all, instead of carrying our label maker with us and dismissing everything under words and ideas. That person, they're a gift. Every one of them, that you have only a brief moment in time to know. Value that gift. That situation is a brief moment within a living landscape built of guaranteed change. Stop standing in it as permanence. Remember the gift that you get to experience any of it in the first place. And in so doing, magically transcend it in a single breath by choosing to express gratitude for impermanence and moving on to the next event. There is a deeper meaning of those lines from Psalm 66 in our inspirational reading today. Make a joyful noise unto God. Sing the honor of his name. Sing the honor of his majesty. Say unto God, how wonderful are thy works. All the earth shall worship thee and shall sing unto thy name forever. They shall say, come and see the works of God, for his wonders are great toward the children of men. Every moment is magic, and everyone in our lives carry that magic within them. They are the works of God. So revel in the wonder of them. Thank you for being in my life. Whether you have been here for years or this is the first time we've seen each other, I am grateful for you. Right now, in this moment that we have together, I am truly grateful for you. And now I want all of you to go and say the same thing to the world. It's magic, you know? Amen.